Welcome to Home Dad Chat, brought to you by the National At-Home Dad Network. My name is Brock,
My name is Danny.
and we are here to talk about life as stay-at-home dads. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
No, I don't want much. I even love handmade crafts made of macaroni. Come on now, you should know me. Times I might eat too much. No worry about my weight, got the dad bod rocking on me. Sketches on my feet, cargo shorts look good on me. I'm a dad, that's what I do.
Welcome back to another edition of Home Dad Chat. I am one of your hosts, Brock Lush, and I've got Danny Mercer with me tonight. Danny, how are you doing?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. Had a really good day today. How about you?
It was a roller coaster, but it ended well, so I can't complain.
It's always a win in the end. That's what matters.
And it's starting to warm up, and all the snow is melting around my house,
Really?
So I'm happy there
Warming
as well.
up, huh?
Yeah.
It's 67 degrees outside.
I'm close. I'm in the 50s today, so we're close.
Ooh.
Yeah. So the only thing I had to deal with was a train derailment on the way to pick up my kid from school, but
Oh no.
that just kind of stopped traffic. But it luckily wasn't anything I had to get around, so that was nice.
Cool.
But the joys of carpool pickup,
Yeah, taxi driver.
Cool. Well, hey everybody, welcome to the show tonight. We are super excited. We're just kind of blazing through our main, usually just Danny and I talking, because we really want to get to tonight's conversation. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see that we've got two guests with us tonight. We have attorney Jennifer Bradley with us, and we have Christian Posh also with us. They are from the Virginia chapter for the National Parents Organization. Christian is an advocate on the Virginia chapter there, and Jennifer's kindly come on to talk with us a little bit as well about just the law side of things for what's going on with what we're going to call a segment of family law reform, and basically be talking about co-parenting. So Jennifer and Christian, thanks for coming on the show today.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
Definitely. And this topic is something that I've had a little bit of a cover with, but not a lot of time with. I've on my a podcast that I run by myself, I've talked with a gentleman who's been through some of the things that you guys deal with, but I'm really excited to just talk about what the Virginia chapter is doing, and just kind of as a whole, what the National Parenting Organization is about, and what it is that they're doing as their mission. Christian, just kind of curious, like a little bit about your background. So as far as, I know you're a dad and everything, but like how many kids you got and that kind of thing.
Sure. Thank you. So I've got two kids total. My older son, will be 14 this May. My younger son is 4. And that's all I've got.
That's a good spread, man.
Spread. Blessings in that spread, but not necessarily planned that way.
Sure.
I guess it was planned that way, right? But just a different plan than I had maybe envisioned early on. But incredible kids. You always worry when you have your second kid, like, oh man, are they gonna be total opposite? No, they're both super relaxed kids, easygoing, which I couldn't be happier about. So I live in Virginia, obviously. That's why we focus our efforts in Virginia. My background is I was actually born and raised overseas half my life, half my childhood, and in Germany most of the time. But then ended up going to the U.S. Air Force and did my time there. Moved to D.C., the D.C. area, and do my day job, but this is what I do in my free time.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your service. Definitely appreciate that. And that it's awesome to hear, just kind of like that spread of kids is interesting. That's got to make parenting very interesting with having a 10-year gap there for sure. Jennifer, you're a mom, right?
I am, and I'm married to an amazing dad who I married late in life compared to most people, at age 35-ish, because I knew he was going to be an amazing dad, and I turned out to be right. He is. He's a better parent than I am, and I joke with my fellow divorce lawyers that if we were ever divorced, he would be the primary parent, no question. So I'm all about dads.
Awesome. And how many kids do you have?
2 boys, 5 and 2.
Nice.
5 and 2. Okay.
Good
nice.
ages too. Good
and
ages.
Are you and your husband, are you both working parents, or?
Yeah, we're both self-employed. So it's been,
okay.
Pros and cons to it, but we've made it work. We're constantly wondering how other parents do it who have 9-to-5 jobs and struggling with COVID and kids being homesick or snow closings and all that stuff. It's hard.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I mean, for Danny and I, we're full-time stay-at-home dads, and so there's a lot of give and take as far as like how family life works with things, especially with COVID right now too. The nice part was like we're almost like prepped for what it's like to just be isolated at home with our kids,
Yeah,
which was nice.
it's-
So we felt bad for like all the so we kind of feel bad for all the working parents
I
who are like,
do,
I'm stuck
yeah.
here at home now.
Feel
You're
bad
like, oh
for,
yeah.
yeah, my wife is home. She's working remotely and she's been home a lot. And she's just like, what? I don't know how you do this. I couldn't do this.
Yeah.
What are we doing here? And I'm like, it's, I don't know what I'm doing either. But
hard.
it was a little bit easier for us to adjust, I think. But I just can't imagine, like you said, Jen, about having all of the things you have as responsibilities for jobs and kids and everything, and just kind of all the juggling balls in the air kind of thing. I don't think it's easy for any parent, really.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, we're definitely glad to have you on the show. And I just kind of wanted to kind of kick things off with just talking about a little bit of what the National Parents Organization is and what it is that they're doing. I don't know if Christian, you want to speak to maybe like the mission of the organization and kind of kick that off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first and foremost, we got to point out is what makes the National Parents Organization unique. And Jen can attest to this. This space of family law and child custody disputes is rife with moms fighting dads and men fighting women. And it's just this constant, the whole system is structured on that conflict. So the National Parents Organization took a step back from that and said, let's find a way to bring moms and dads, men and women together around this issue instead of in our own individual bunkers, just lobbing grenades back and forth. That really doesn't do anyone any good, right? And it just continues to exacerbate the issue. So that's what I really liked about them when I came across them. almost 8 years ago now, I formed their Virginia chapter, and we have stayed true to that construct, right? Just over half our membership is women, whether they're moms or stepmoms or aunts or sisters, what have you. And I will tell you that they are some of our, if not our most effective advocates, because they come at it from a different, but that's not a bad thing at all, from a different perspective.
Neutral. I think it's neutral, no skin in the game.
No, I think that's great too. I love the fact you're saying that, you've got sort of a 50-50, grouping of folks that are involved with the organization. So like the one thing you started talking about there was the fact that parents are sort of like pitted up against each other in a fight to, for like parents' rights and that being the focus of like, is it the court system that's just trying to get them to sort of fight, or is it the system? Like, why is that such goal or something of like the system, how it's built? What is that all about?
So I'll talk a little bit on that. I imagine Jen has some comments on that too. And what I'm about to say, Jen knows me well enough to know that I'm not speaking ill of her. She is one of the good ones, but the system is structured to, how do I say this? Family law attorneys, like a lot of attorneys, bill by the hour. So the more time that someone spends in conflict and in an adversarial relationship with their ex, the more time is billable and the more money that people make, right? And it's not just attorneys, right? There's other players in this space too that make money off this conflict. I don't think most attorneys are necessarily focused on that necessarily, right? Some certainly are, right? And there are a growing number of attorneys like Jen and a couple other attorneys that advise us that are the good kind that we say, right? They say, look, we're not here to rake people over the coals financially. You want to do what's best and right for your family and your kids, and then help you move on with your lives, respectively. The system is structured in such a way as when, and we'll speak of if I can say, a heterosexual couple, right? And there are all kinds of families out there. We know that, and the same story applies to any kind of family dynamic. But a man and woman are married, have 2-3 kids. Unfortunately, let's say they get divorced. At that point, if they go the legal route, the court route, right now, by and large, they are told individually by their attorneys, hey, you've got to fight like hell and spend like hell, because if you don't, you might end up being the loser. And if you're the loser, you're going to be labeled the visitor. And you will then have visitation with your kids. And we always say that you don't have visitation with your kids. You have visitation with people that are in prison, right? Not your own children. That is the point where most parents have the fear of God put in them and say, oh my gosh, I need to do whatever I can to fight for my kids. So the system kind of preys on a parent's innate desire to fight for their kids, right? So that's the first thing. And then the parents enter this dynamic of where they're advised to tear the other parent down and make them out to be the worst possible person in the world. And at the end of that process, which could be 6 months, a year, 3, 5, or years or more in some cases, at the end of that process, they're then told, okay, you've just spent X amount of time tearing each other apart. Now you got to get along. Now start co-parenting and like the other person, right? And don't speak ill of the other person, right? Which is completely antithetical to any sort of logical train of thought, right? So that's what we're trying to really undo and to lower the temperature, so to speak.
So I'm curious. So from that perspective to Jen's perspective as a lawyer, what have you seen and experienced in that sort of like what Christian's kind of bringing up as what seems like an experience that not only has like as an example, but probably has some personal attachment to it as well.
So I have to be careful because I don't want a mob of lawyers outside of my office tomorrow ready to bother me. But I really think that truthfully, a big part of the problem is actually from the bench. For the older judges that when they came onto the bench, they were trained that there was this tender years presumption of, for young children, it's best to be with the mom because mom has been staying home with them and mom is comforting and caring and dad goes to work and dad doesn't care about kids. Dad comes home to be fed by mom and, get the whiskey and cigar and pat the children on the head as they get put off to bed by mom. And that was ruled unconstitutional in, the 80s or 90s. But there's a lot of judges on the bench that have been there since before the 80s or 90s and that were practicing law in the 70s and 80s when that was the law. And so while they've been made aware that that's been ruled unconstitutional, that's still just their state of mind. And the reason why I'm agreed to help out the NPO on this legislation is because, it's really difficult as a practitioner to have such varying biases across jurisdictions in Northern Virginia in particular, where, from county to county, city to county, I practice in 7 different jurisdictions, and it's very clear that depending on where you are, you can have a chance of getting 50-50 custody as a father, or you can have no chance of it, depending on where you are. And I just think the judiciary needs to be educated about the research behind shared parenting. We're bringing on board some mental health professionals that I work a lot with in collaborative divorce, who Christian and I talked to last week, and they were like, this is a no-brainer. The research completely supports this. It has for years. This will be so easy for us to do. We're so happy to work with you. And this is so important because, we'll just put together a spreadsheet of all of the different studies backing what you're saying so that you can educate everybody about it. Because I just think that a lot of people aren't aware that things have changed. It's not the 70s anymore. Dads are involved. Even if they are the working parent, they are still interested and involved. It's not the 60s and the 70s. Dads hate their grocery store. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, and two, even from the world that we're in with being stay-at-home dads, that you see where, there are 4 or 5 million stay-at-home dads in the United States. And you still even see, where those couples are getting divorced. And it's interesting. It's like, all right, like, what are you going to do now? Because you've been the primary person and that judge, like, you've got all this evidence to show like, hey, I've been with these kids forever. And you still want to give all the rights to the mom.
Because you're a man. Go to work, go back to work.
Go to work, get a job.
Yeah. It's that whole 1950s, state of mind or whatever. It's crazy. Yeah.
You've clearly been coasting, right? Just chilling the whole time.
Yeah.
Bonbons and couch time. That's me.
Well, and even aside from the flip flop in the stay at home versus stay at home moms versus dads, there's also the increase in, by parent work, households where both parents are working. Like that's increased substantially where it's both parents are like my household. We're both bearing the weight of everything. Like nobody's doing more of anything.
Right.
It's interesting to me. And you were talking about how like, you got these older mindset. Have you seen anywhere like there are younger judges that are coming up that are kind of helping to sort of like change the motion of getting it to more of a co-parenting mindset? Is that sort of the swing that's taking place right now?
Absolutely. In some jurisdictions, the jurisdiction I primarily practice, that's how the judges think, and for me advising my clients, it's just, that's kind of an automatic presumption. It's unstated, but, absent extenuating factors, obviously abuse, neglect, inability to have, if they live 50 miles apart, it's not possible. But, if you have a dad that's fit and willing and able and raising his hand and wants to be available, and he's got a loving relationship with the kids, there's a reason to make him the, every other weekend dad. And it's just a shame that some jurisdictions they believe, and they say that, well, we believe it's best for children to have a primary residence. But as the research that we're gathering has shown, that's not true. It's not true. It's actually better for them to have as much contact with both parents as possible, and as frequent and often as possible, as opposed to a primary household.
Yeah, more of a stable relationship than is more necessary for fathers and mothers to have with their kids, and their kids to have with both. Go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's not a zero-sum game, right? This is not an either or, which is unfortunately how it's been portrayed and practiced for decades. This is also not hard. We live in a modern era. We can do this. We can calculate days on our phones in about 7 seconds, right? I'm sure there's an app. In fact, I know there's an app for that. So this is not difficult. It's not the number of days and whatnot is not rocket science. It's also not rocket science to have a conversation about work schedules and availability and what are the parents' jobs? Are they around? Are they not? What's the point is to have the children spend as much time as possible with each parent. And a lot of times what we come across in Virginia and other states wise is judges in particular will think that, well, it's either 50-50 or nothing, or back to every other weekend, right? There's a whole swath of options in between those two that is also possible and is also best for kids. So speaking generally about my own arrangement, and I'm not going to get into details about it, but my older son lives halfway across the country. Obviously 50-50 is not going to work, right? Every other weekend is not going to work because of that. So the point is, we have worked out an arrangement where he is here in Virginia with us as much as possible. The problem, it's taken us 3 states and 15 judges and 20 plus attorneys to get there. Why? That's crazy, right? That's ridiculous. There should be no need for people to go through that. And that brings me to one of our taglines, at least in Virginia, where we say we're fighting for family law reform because others can't and children need it. And that others can't piece is important because I reminded myself of that all the time when I was going through my own experience. I said, it's frustrating. It's expensive. It drained me in all kinds of ways, but I was still one of the lucky ones. I still was able to afford to fight. I still had supportive parents and a work environment, et cetera. 70, 80%, and Jen could probably tell you more specifically, of the people sucked up into this system don't have that. They don't have the income to retain an attorney, and they don't have a flexible work environment where they can work from home and do this and do that. What about those children, right? And those parents, whether it's mom or dad? It doesn't mean they love their kids any less. It doesn't mean they're any less competent. It just means that that's what their job is, right? That's what their situation is. And we should still work and strive to give those children in those situations as much time as possible with both of their parents. And we can do that. We just have to actually sit down and think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so with the fact that, you've got all these different states, is it basically, from what I'm understanding and what I was looking at on the website too, and which, by the way, is a great resource just in general for like checking out which states have chapters like this, which I was looking around at different chapters to see like which states had them. Georgia has one, Danny. Ohio has a chapter. I was sad to see that my home state of Indiana does not have one. When it comes to changing these laws, like it's a state by state, like there's not a federal blanket that can be put on this. Is that what I understand from that?
Right.
Wow.
And it's
okay.
a battle. About half the states have statutes that require either a presumption of shared parenting or a presumption in favor of maximizing time with both parents. Virginia has, our statute says that the court shall assure both parents of frequent and continuing access with the children. Does that mean that the judges can find that every other weekend with dad is frequent and continuing? Yeah, they can. That doesn't have any impact. So we need something stronger than that.
Yeah.
Is it kind of presumed? Is there like a presumption that basically like that when you are getting separated that, oh, I've got to go get an attorney and we've got to go through this? Or is there any advocacy as far as like, hey, like you should really try to work this out between the two of you, like in a way that, you don't need to bring lawyers into it and you don't have to go before a judge. And then like the lawyer is like sort of like the last step. Like there's no other way to go about this. I've got to have somebody arbitrate for me. And then from there, like if they do go to the court system, are they locked in like with those plans? Like, or is there flexibility? How does that kind of play out?
So lawyers in Virginia have a professional responsibility to advocate for or advise clients about all the different options outside of court for resolving their disputes, whether it's related to custody, division of assets, support, all of the stuff. And that includes, kitchen table agreements, sit down and figure it out, go to the coffee shop and scribble something out and give it to a lawyer, mediation, attorney to attorney negotiation, collaborative divorce, which I do a lot of. And then court should be your last resort. It should be. And, we're supposed to be explaining that to our clients and explaining that, the cost benefit analysis, and going to court is the absolute, worst possible outcome. You're rolling the dice to have a judge determine what's best for your kids after hearing from you for a couple of hours of testimony, having never met your kids. Like, isn't it far better for the two of you to figure this out together? And I frequently refer, if I have a consultation with someone, I very often refer them to mental professionals in our community who will do a parenting plan mediation with both parties outside of lawyers. Just sit down. We're not talking about money. We're just talking about what's it going to look like once we separate houses and what's best for our kids. And I found that to be tremendously successful, and people are so happy with it. But to your question about whether everything's set in stone, custody is always modifiable in the future if there's a change in circumstances. Anything, if it doesn't work out, the kids are suffering, the grades are falling, somebody needs therapy, one parent's not getting homework done. You can always go back and revisit it, whether it's an agreement or a court order.
Now, is that just for the state of Virginia though, or is that like change per state? Because I only say that because one of the guys I was talking with out of, I think, New Jersey was stating that like when he got into his situation, he had set up like, hey, I'm going to do I think it was like every other weekend or something like that. And then when he tried to go back to the judge was like, well, this is what you agreed to. And he was like, but she's agreed to allow this to change. Like it was a really screwed up situation. So that's why I was curious of that.
I can't imagine there's any state that says when you agree to a custody scenario, it's set in stone forever. I'm pretty sure 99.9% of the time, it's just, you have to show that there's been a material change in circumstances since the last order.
Okay.
And so maybe he wasn't able to do that.
Okay. No, that's a good key thing to know. I was curious about that. So Danny, you got any other questions with this or?
Well, I did want to talk just for a minute or so, because I think as far as for the National Parent Organization, talking to the National At-Home Dad Organization, I think we as an organization really understand the importance of having an involved father. What a father is to his family and things along those lines, and not to in any way exclude, of course, moms or even same-sex couples. That's really not the point I'm trying to make, but we have had statistical scientific studies over the years that explain what an involved father does for the family. And I know that your organization has a few of those things themselves that they have that they use in probably with court cases and things and talking with judges. And I wonder if you could just address just a few of the facts that you've brought up in your paperwork and such about how important it is for kids to have both parents even after a divorce.
Yeah, I mean, I as I'm sitting here, I'm Googling an op-ed I wrote a while ago in the Virginia Pilot, because it goes into a lot of the statistics, and I've got it right here. So I will say, in general, children raised in single family or single parent homes account for 63% of teen suicides. And oh, by the way, this data is a couple years old. 71% of high school dropouts, 85% of those in prison, 85% of children who exhibit behavioral disorders, 90% of homeless and runaway children. The list goes on, but those are some of the bigger ones. And this is not to speak ill of single parents at all, right? That's not what my point is with that. My point is rather that we are setting those parents and those children up for a lack of success, right, in life by continuing with our status quo. When those children have maximized access or shared parenting arrangements with both parents, in particular fathers, because that's just how the numbers are right now, then those numbers are greatly reduced. In general, I will tell you that the one statistic or the one issue we always talk about with boys is proclivity to violence, right? That if you have an active and involved father, those boys are much less likely to, stereotypically speaking, become that next story you hear about, right? Of a school shooting or whatnot. And if you look at all those kids involved in those school shootings, I won't say all of them, because I haven't looked at all of them, but the majority of them come from broken homes, come from homes where the father was not involved for one reason or another. And it's by no means saying that if you have an involved father, that those will not happen, but they're much less likely to happen. And for girls, the lack of a father more often than not leads to issues with lack of self-confidence, or perhaps fears of abandonment, et cetera. And again, I'm not an expert in this stuff. I'm only telling you what we've read in some of these studies. So those are all things that we don't want our children to deal with, boys or girls, right? So the more that we can mitigate those issues for our children, why would we not want to do that? It's very much common sense, and the reason we advocate for here in Virginia, and we're trying to be as holistic as we can, is something that Jen mentioned earlier, is that it can sometimes depend on where you live, which district you're in, what jurisdiction you're in, what judge you get. It shouldn't, but it can. And Virginia is interesting too, because Northern Virginia leans one way in its thinking, shall we say, and then you get about 40 miles south of DC, and it's very much the opposite, right? You get into Western Virginia, and that's a whole nother scenario out there. And not speaking ill of any one of those, my point is that they're different. There are different mindsets and philosophies on families and raising children. And if we can just advocate for what's best for children in the implementation of shared parenting across the board, I think that would go a long way towards fixing this. I'm a big U2 fan. So there's a line from Bono where he says, where you live should not decide whether you live or whether you die. This is not about life or death.
It's not, but I mean, there are parts of it that can be. I mean, just from your statistics where you're talking about, I mean, it can be life or death for those kids, depending on the situation at hand. So yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, having both parents and just is so very important, and looking at it after divorce and into custody, and that shared parenting, giving parents the ability to give their children what they really need the most. And that is exactly shared parenting.
At the end of the day, I mean, that was part of our arguments against the Virginia legislature this year. And, they were saying, well, you all are trying to say that shared parenting, the presumption of that should be elevated above determining what's in the best interest of the children. And my point was, you all are failing to acknowledge that what we're saying is shared parenting is in the best interest of the children. That's what the research has shown. And that's what we're going to come back with next year, a list of all the studies. Like, we're not just making this up. Shared parenting is in the best interest of the majority of children. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions to that rule. But, 9 times out of 10, we should recognize that that's the case, as opposed to acting as if there's an even, a ground zero where it's every man for himself, where, Christian kind of started the conversation. Right now, it's, you got to dig up as much mud as you can and fight and claw and, make the other parent out to be the worst possible parent that you possibly can, so that you can get primary custody. And that's not the way it should be.
Yeah. And not to get too political, but is this a Republican, like you see more support from Republican side or more from the Democrat side? How does that sort of pan out for you?
So no, the answer to that question is no, it's not. It's a children's issue. I will say there are always fringes, right? I'll say there's people on the far left and the far right who oppose this issue for very different reasons, but just as strongly. And that's okay, right? Everyone can have their own opinion. But mainstream America, mainstream Virginians, overwhelmingly support this. A year and a half ago, we commissioned a study, a representative study in Virginia that found depending on the question we asked, 95 to 97% of Virginians think shared parenting should be the norm and think that this should be a change in law that happens right away. I don't know of any other topic that has that much support. And oh, by the way, those kind of results are mirrored in Ohio, Kentucky, I want to say Wisconsin. There's a couple other states that have commissioned studies as well. So it's overwhelmingly supported by citizens.
Happily married people.
Yes, but there are also some part of the demographics include single people and divorced people, and older and younger, right? Getting into ethnic distributions as well, which is important.
I mean, my point being that things change once you're in it. And so suddenly your position changes. But, you know, for the majority of people in a neutral standpoint, they recognize that that's the norm now. That is life now. Dads are involved as much as moms. It's not, like I said, it's not the 50s and the 60s anymore.
Right. Definitely. Well, and so I'm curious, Christian, you were talking about the fact that there is definitely like a popularity of things kind of changing as far as that goes. But you also, I remember when we talked with you, sort of getting this ball rolling to have this conversation tonight, was you had mentioned that a lot of guys and just parents in general that you came up to had no recollection or idea of what this was, or like the family law side of things. And you know, of course, everybody, I guarantee everybody's heard of co-parenting in some form or fashion, but when it comes to the family law reform side of things, it's not a widely talked about topic. Is that part of, like, you've got to get that out there to really get this movement going further?
I think that matters. That's important. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. This is a topic that people don't think about unless they're in it.
Right.
And by then it's too late. It's not a sexy topic. Who wants to, hey, let's talk about divorce. Let's talk about fighting the person you love right now, right? The person you've married. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about hypothetical situations where you're tearing each other apart. No, that's awful. No one wants that. No one wants to talk about that, but it's a reality. And we're not talking about 10% of the population either. And to an increasing extent, I will say it's not just divorced parent or divorcing parents. People are getting married less often and less frequently. So now you have situations where there was no marriage, right? Well, what do we do in those situations? Are those parents less competent parents just because they weren't married? No, of course not. Marital status doesn't matter, right? And that becomes more relevant in same-sex couples as well, depending on the state they live in. So bottom line, kids need both parents as much as possible, whether those parents are married, divorced, never married, whatever, right? So we do have to get that conversation out there. And that's why I was personally really excited at the last Dad 2.0 here in DC. Pre-COVID, at the very end, Dad 2.0 announced that their two focus areas for the future are going to be paid leave and shared parenting. To me, that was so encouraging and inspiring because, as you know, Dad 2.0 community is very influential and very, very well thought of, right?
Yeah.
But even a couple of years ago, I don't know if they were necessarily thinking about that, right? But there's been a change in the zeitgeist to say, no, this is relevant and it is happening. And oh, by the way, it's affecting the population that we as dads care about most, which is our children.
Yeah, I know it's something that, Dad 2.0 has jumped on in the past couple of years. When I was in San Antonio before, because San Antonio was the year before DC, Doveman plus Care came in and said, hey, like, this is our new platform. Like, we are pushing for paid paternity leave, paid leave, just that whole side of things. And they started to like really hammer into like, we're going to go straight to, the source here. And they went straight to talking to Congress, Senate, that kind of stuff, and setting up meetings with them to try to get things pushed through. So yeah, it's really exciting to see that has definitely picked up momentum. I think this past year has really shown like the importance of companies needing to have that for their employees. And I know I've talked to plenty of dads, especially, and just parents in general, who are like, we're pregnant, it's great. And we are super scared to like go and talk to our employer about it because it could mean like one of our jobs might, get kiboshed because we're trying to build a family. And it's really sad that that's the case.
Yeah, no, you're right. And what, the underlying premise of paid leave is the exact same underlying premise of shared parenting, which is that both parents, regardless of gender or sexual orientation, are capable, competent, loving, good parents.
And both are losing sleep every night for 3 months to 9 months to a year.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Suffering.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And it's, I think we'd be remiss too, if we didn't talk about, briefly at least, about some of the myths, if you will, about shared parenting, right? So I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone watching this that maybe doesn't know anything about it or is opposed to it, right? So one thing that I'll pick maybe 2 or 3 of them here. one thing that we always hear is like, oh, well, you're just involved in this because you want to change your own circumstance. You want to change your own case and have that change for yourself. My case hasn't been here in Virginia for 10 years, right? So even if Virginia's law changes, which is what I'm trying to do, it has zero effect on me personally. None of the members of our team are doing this for their own cases, right? Their kids are either grown or they're close to being grown or they're not here, but they're not doing it for those reasons. They're doing it because they live in Virginia and because when they want to make things better. Another thing you'll hear is that, oh, shared parenting doesn't work if the parents fight, if they don't get along. No, in fact, shared parenting will decrease the temperature and help those parents to get along better, right? Think about the difference in approaches between telling two parents, hey, you've got to fight each other right now and duke it out and spend as much as you have, versus, hey, relax. You're both parents now. You're both still going to be parents at the end of this. The schedule will look different, yes, but you'll both still be important in the lives of your children. Totally different approach, totally different process to go through. And the parents will view each other differently, right? From the get-go, they're told we are going to be equal. We are going to be just as important to our kids then in the future as we are now. And that is wonderful. And that is what I really care about. Okay, let's figure out the details of who picks up when and who does what when, right?
And I've talked to attorneys in other states that have adopted this presumption of shared parenting or maximization of time, and they've confirmed more cases are settling out of court. It's a lot easier for us to convince our clients who would have been the parent who wanted to go to court and fight. You can't, you don't have a case. The laws change, things are different. You got to just accept reality, and it reduces conflict. It keeps cases out of court, and that's good for everybody. Because if custody ends up being resolved in court, whoever loses is waiting to come back next year or the year after. And it's a constant cycle. I mean, we have clients that have been our clients for 10 or 12 years because of that.
Yeah. Wow. The other thing, the last kind of myth I want to mention too is related to that, decreasing conflict. A lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, well, shared parenting is just this wedge issue that abusers use to maintain access to their victims. Not true. 100%. I will tell you, there is no more ardent supporter of protecting victims of domestic violence than a shared parenting advocate. That is why that exception for abuse is always in every piece of legislation that we propose. And if abuse is a factor, abuse of any kind is a factor, that's a separate conversation. But we're talking about the majority of cases that do not involve abuse, where shared parenting is the best thing for kids. And in fact, I'll mention Kentucky as the most recent example. In 2018, they passed a rebuttable presumption for shared custody. There was a lot of concern from opposition that said, oh, well, we're seeing the incidents of domestic violence go up now. In fact, the incidents of domestic violence the rates of incidents have gone down.
Nice.
And that's the first time that's happened in years.
That's great.
Now, does correlation mean causation? No, not necessarily, but none of us are surprised about that because of the nature of decreasing conflict and lowering the temperature and saying, look, you have very little reason to fight here, right? If anything, you may have fought more as a married couple when you're arguing about what kind of coffee did you make in the morning? Well, that's not what I asked for, and I wanted this. Nope. There's very little stuff to argue about, and you just got to talk about the logistics.
That's great.
That's great. So one of the things that I wanted to also point out too for anybody that's listening is that there is a website that I'll have in the show notes for the National Parents Organization that allows you to donate to this organization to help out. If you're listening to this and you didn't know that this was something that you could help out with in just a monetary fashion to help the folks that are running these different chapters to be able to, do different things, take a look at that, because I think everybody's always looking for some way to help out. You're connected with somebody who's gone through the situation before, separation, divorce, all that kind of stuff. And so I just want folks out there to know that there is a way to help monetarily for that as well. And then the other thing too is that like I was saying, there are some states that don't have chapters. So if, listening to Christian and talk about what he's been doing and Jennifer, what she's been doing with this, if that's something that, you see your state, either they're involved with it and you want to try and get involved, then reach out to those chairs that are doing that. And if there's not, then from there's a way to get set up with a chapter. And so you can actually click on a map that's interactive, which I thought was really cool. And it will actually just straight up show you like, oh, look, like these people have, or this state has a chair and vice chair. Like some of them are really like they've got quite a few people on there, and then others it's like there's nobody there, and so the state's just kind of functioning however it has for probably forever. And so it's your opportunity to step up and maybe make some changes that maybe you didn't think you had the power to help out and do. So I just kind of want to give everybody like an action step there to like really take a look at it, because it's I feel like it's something like Christian said that it's not talked about enough, and it needs to be talked about more because it's here. It's sort of the elephant in the room in some ways, and a lot of people are trying to like sweep the elephant under the rug, and that it's just not going to happen. Like get it out there and talk about it. So just wanted to put that out there. And Christian, the article from the Virginia pilot, I'll have to get a link from you for that so that I can put that in the show notes as well, so folks can see those statistics and things that are in there as well. We really appreciate you guys coming on tonight. This was a very enlightening conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I hope that things continue to move forward positively for you. I know that there's a lot. It's the beginning of the year, so I'm sure you guys have got quite a few things that you're trying to push through, and I wish you all the best in it.
Thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Appreciate you guys' time and highlighting this. And I'll put a plug out there too. Experts like Jen and the mental health experts that she's connected us with are so key to this. So if you're listening to this, if you're watching this and you are one of those professionals yourself, or someone who is, by all means, let them know to get involved. Let them know that the only way that we can make this better is if we work at it.
And the other thing too, I'll have Twitter accounts for the National Parenting Organization in the show notes, along with how to follow Christian on Twitter as well. I don't know if you're on Twitter, Jennifer, at all.
I'm not, no.
That's okay. You're fine. So we'll put Christian's on there so that folks can follow him and kind of see the things that he's working on there. But again, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And we really appreciate everything that you shared with us, and wish you the best.
Very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
I'm a dad, that's what I do.